Good morning. We begin with a major development in the Middle East, where tensions remain elevated as the United States enters day 3 of a sweeping naval blockade on Iran. The operation is already affecting global shipping routes, energy markets, and diplomatic dynamics across the region. At the same time, there are early signs that backchannel diplomacy may be gaining traction between Washington and Tehran. So the question right now is this: are we approaching the final phase of this confrontation, or the start of a longer and more complex standoff? Here's where things stand. US military forces now report what they describe as full operational control of key maritime access points surrounding Iran. The naval blockade is effectively restricting most commercial traffic entering and leaving Iranian ports, marking one of the most assertive strategic moves in recent years. According to US officials, more than 20 commercial vessels were allowed to pass through the strait over the past 24 hours, but only after strict clearance procedures and onboard inspections. Several others were denied passage and redirected, and notably, officials stress that 0 unauthorized vessels have successfully crossed the blockade. The operation is being coordinated through US Central Command with a clear objective: apply sustained economic pressure while maintaining controlled flow through critical international waterways. The implications are substantial. Roughly 90% of Iran's trade relies on maritime routes. So this is not just a military maneuver, it is a targeted economic choke point. Within less than 2 days, the blockade has already slowed Iran's trade activity significantly, signaling both capability and intent. At the center of this strategy is a long-standing US priority: preventing Iran from developing nuclear weapons capability. Recent statements from US leadership reinforce that position, emphasizing both readiness and restraint. Officials have indicated that the United States possesses the capacity to disable key infrastructure inside Iran, including transportation networks and energy systems, within a short time frame if escalation occurs. However, that option is being framed as a last resort. The current approach prioritizes pressure over direct confrontation. In public remarks, the situation has been described as close to over. That phrase suggests growing confidence that coordinated economic and military pressure may be shifting the strategic balance, but the message remains firm. The United States is not prepared to compromise on nuclear proliferation concerns. At the same time, there are signs that diplomacy may be re-emerging as a viable path forward. Multiple reports indicate that the United States and Iran have agreed in principle to resume direct discussions. Details remain limited. There is no confirmed timeline, no official venue, and no public framework for negotiations. However, sources suggest talks could begin within days, potentially in a neutral location. This marks a notable shift after a period defined by escalation and uncertainty. Still, the situation remains highly sensitive. The White House has made it clear that there is no formal extension of the current ceasefire at this time. So, while communication channels may be reopening, stability is far from guaranteed. What we are seeing is a narrow and potentially brief window for de-escalation. If progress stalls, that window could close quickly. Even as diplomatic signals emerge, the United States is maintaining, and in some areas expanding, its military presence in the region. Additional troops are being deployed, naval assets are being repositioned, and a carrier strike group remains a central component of the current posture. This dual-track strategy, combining negotiation with visible military readiness, is designed to strengthen leverage at the negotiating table. It sends a clear and deliberate signal. The United States is open to a diplomatic resolution, but fully prepared to escalate if necessary. This balance between pressure and restraint is defining the current phase of the situation. The effects are also being felt across global markets, particularly in the energy sector. Oil prices are currently hovering near $92 per barrel. That level is elevated, but still below some of the more extreme projections seen earlier in the week. Even so, uncertainty remains high. Energy analysts warn that prices could remain volatile, especially if shipping disruptions expand or tensions escalate further. In the United States, gasoline prices in some regions have already moved above $4 per gallon. And beyond immediate consumer impact, there are broader concerns about long-term supply stability. Compounding the pressure, the US has opted not to renew certain sanctions, waivers tied to Iranian oil exports. That decision is expected to further limit Iran's access to global markets, particularly among major buyers. Taken together, the blockade and sanctions are applying sustained economic pressure from multiple directions. For now, a ceasefire remains in place, involving the United States, Israel, and Iran. But officials across the board describe it as a fragile ceasefire. There is no confirmed extension, no formal framework, and no clear indication of how long it will hold. This moment is being treated as critical. Behind the scenes, diplomatic efforts are ongoing. At the same time, military forces remain on high alert. The margin for error is extremely narrow, and decisions made in the coming days could determine the direction of the conflict. Looking ahead, three primary scenarios are emerging. First, successful negotiations could produce a structured agreement, likely centered on nuclear restrictions and regional security arrangements. Second, the ceasefire could expire without progress, potentially leading to renewed military engagement. And third, a prolonged standoff could take shape, where economic pressure continues, but without a clear resolution. Each of these paths carries significant consequences, not only for the region, but for global stability. At this stage, all remain possible. For now, the situation remains fluid. A powerful naval blockade is in place. Diplomatic efforts are cautiously moving forward, and military forces remain positioned for rapid response. The balance between escalation and resolution is holding for now. But the next few days could prove decisive. Because what happens next will not only shape US-Iran relations, it could influence the stability of the entire Middle East. We'll continue to monitor developments and bring you updates as this story evolves.